Now, Brits could face hundreds of cancelled flights after a safety crisis at Boeing led to aircraft shortages. Now, just last week, a Boeing 737 of Transair en route to Bamako veered off the runway at Dakar International Airport in Senegal, and 11 passengers were injured. And that's just the latest woe that's come upon Boeing, a beleaguered airline. Now, joining me now in the studio is the travel and aviation expert, Sally Gethin. Sally, always a pleasure to see you. People will have seen these horror stories in the press now, scenes for months and months and months. Doors blowing out mid-air, parts of engines falling off, Boeing really under the cosh. Now, in terms of British holidaymakers, what does that mean for their summers?
Well, what it means is that Boeing is now being limited to how many airplanes it can actually deliver to airlines. And airlines like Ryanair, for example, are heavily reliant on the Boeing 737 MAX. So a number of airlines, including low-cost carriers, here in Europe and around the world, are having to trim back their schedules. So they put certain routes and flights into their schedules for passengers to book. But they're realising now they can't deliver to those slots, so they're going to have to trim that back, which means fewer airplanes for holidaymakers to actually travel on, to fly on.
So on the simple supply and demand side of things, we've got the perfect storm. There are less planes able to take off. There are cancellations as a consequence. And you also told me earlier there's now record demand. You've got the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Not enough planes, too many punters. That can only mean one thing: higher prices.
Absolutely. So we're looking at record figures since before the pandemic of people travelling. There really is this pent-up demand. It was 4.7 billion. It is 4.7 billion passengers predicted to travel this year compared to 4.5 billion in 2019. So you can imagine there's this squeeze on the amount of planes that people can fly on. And all that means is that where there is capacity, where there are seats available, those airfares are going to go up. And obviously lots of other issues behind it: cost of living, inflation, airlines' high operating costs as well, driving these airfares up.
And so we're showing pictures on your screen now. You can see them if you're looking at home. This is of that flight where the door literally blew off mid-air. Those passengers are strapped in, look, with their oxygen masks down, staring out to terra firma below. Look, they're literally staring at the plane. Sally, that is hardly confidence inspiring. You can understand why regulators are grounding these flights. But what we want to end with here is a bit of advice, a bit of positivity. If people, millions of people, of course, millions of Brits want to get away, how can they get around this? How can they save money? What should they be doing?
So really, you're going to have to shop around for the best value price you can get. I mean, when airlines know they're going to have to trim back, they tend to give you at least 14 days' notice, because otherwise they'd be liable for compensation. So you should get some protection in that. And, clearly you have to keep an eye on what is actually happening day to day or week to week to know where you stand with your travel. And
are there any airlines that sort of don't rely so heavily on Boeing you can look at, or you just don't know that kind of information? Information's not out there.
No, I mean, EasyJet tends to have Airbus aircraft, the A320. Ryanair, like I said, has the Boeing 737 MAX, not the type that was involved in that incident there, I might add. It's a slightly different type that they're running. But, yeah, I mean, many people now are actually filtering their choice of airline based on what airplane type it's flying. That is as bad as it is getting. The word's gone out there, the headlines have been out there, and social media is viral on, people's self-preservation interests. But I have to add that flying is still incredibly safe, and it is still incredibly rare to be involved in any incident at all.
But that's fascinating information. So you can actually go online and find out which airlines use which planes. Not about the safety issue, but the fear of cancellation. That's sensible advice. Yeah,
although sometimes airlines might switch airplane type at the last minute depending on their schedules and availability. So, yeah.
Sally Gethin, excellent advice as ever. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio here on GB.